Hi everyone, David Aragona and Mike Beer here talking some pick five strategy for Gotham Saturday at Aqueduct. Done a couple of these types of videos with the Gino last week, and this week we actually did one on the Fountain of Youth card for Gulfstream, which you can also find on the Daily Racing Forum YouTube channel. But Mike, we were talking a little bit offline. The sequence at Aqueduct on Saturday that includes the Gotham as well as two other stakes races, it's not an easy one. These are pretty competitive races. In that sequence at Gulfstream, there was a horse, Mindframe, that's going to be an extremely short price that I think is a universal single for a lot of people. There's not really a horse like that in this sequence at Aqueduct.
Yeah, there's probably not. I mean, I suppose you'll get a lot of love for Sand Devil in the Gotham during this sequence. He should be a relatively short price, and he seems like, at least in my opinion, a clear horse to beat. But the other four races surrounding it, they're pretty wide open.
Now, in these pick five videos that we're starting up, we're trying something where we try to think more about value when tickets playing multiple tickets to try to upgrade the horses that we really like in these sequences, rather than just trying to put all of our opinions into one caveman style ticket. So what we're going to do as we go through each of these races 6 through 10 for the late pick five at Aqueduct on Saturday, is to slot horses into three categories: key, use, and defend, which is kind of a riff on the ABC method that Steve Christ popularized through his writings, as well as through the DRF ticket maker that some of you might be familiar with, but using different terms rather than just ABC to get players thinking a little bit more about how to prioritize their opinions when they're crafting these multi-race sequence wagers. So key horses, those are going to be your strongest opinions, horses that you think have a high likelihood of winning, but also are going to offer value, because at the end of the day, you want to hit a sequence that's going to pay something. So you're trying to upgrade those horses to key status if they're going to increase the overall value or expected value of your eventual wager. Use horses are just horses that you like. Maybe they're not going to offer the best value in the race, but they're just logical players. And at the end of the day, you're probably not going to hit a sequence where every strongest opinion comes in all five legs. So you want to spice it up with some of those use horses that you can rely on through the sequence. And then the defend horses, kind of the horses that you would think of as C horses in the ABC methodology. Those are horses that are just kind of your backup plan if you're wrong in a race. Maybe horses that scare you when you're handicapping that you don't really want to bet, but if you're wrong in that race and you get prices home in another leg, maybe that's your backup plan to not have your ticket be dead. So Mike, with all that in mind, you ready to get into the handicapping?
Yeah, let's do it. These are some pretty challenging races, and beginning with the first leg, race number 6, which is the Stymie, the 1 turn mile. I don't know about you, David. I spent a long time looking at this race, and I kind of came away looking with two main opinions on this race. My first opinion was that I really like the 7 Worcester. So he's going to be my key in this race. My other opinion was between the two favorites, the 5 and the 8. I much prefer the 5.
Yeah, Bank Frenzy feels like a horse that a lot of handicappers are going to assess as being reliable, because he just has such a strong record at Aqueduct and also at this 1 turn mile distance. And he's been really consistent lately, but he's a New York bred who's facing some tougher company here than I think he's met in some recent starts. So he is a use horse for me, and I think we both put him in the use category, but I didn't see him as offering great value in this race. So Mike, why don't we throw up your grid for this race first? And you mentioned the number 7 Worcester. He's a horse coming in for trainer Brittany Russell, who's just been really visually impressive in his last couple of wins.
Yeah, he's one of the horses in this sequence that I really just want to lean on, and then maybe try to spend some capital spreading a little bit in some of the other legs. I want to start this thing off trying to get Worcester home. I think he's going to be a fair price in this race. First of all, this is a horse who I remember going back when Baffert had him early on. I was a fan of this horse early on when Baffert had him. I know it took him 8 starts to break his maiden, but I thought that there was something there with him, and it obviously took him a while, as you've already sort of referenced there. I think Brittany's gotten this horse into good form since she's taken over. I like his last 2 wins. I know they're not the strongest fields necessarily, but I like the way that he won 2 starts back where they just put him right up on the pace. He came from last in his most recent start, and he won that race convincingly. I just think he's in good form here, shipping in, and he can get the right trip in here. So I really like him in this race, and I want to bet him, and I want to really lean on him in here. I'm going to use Yo Daddy as one of my backup horses, just because he's in really good form. I'm concerned that he's had 2, pretty good trips in a row. Obviously, the most recent start, he only faced 2 other horses. He was always going to win that race, even when he beat a good field too. He got a really good trip in there, and he's a horse who I'm concerned gets himself into trouble sometimes, and being drawn inside here, if he gets sort of caught behind horses early in this race, I'm just worried that he won't perform up to par, but I don't want to get beat by him. I'm happy to get beat by the 8 Coastal Mission. I just don't think he's that good, and he's not going to be a good price in here. And then I want you, I know you're going to get into your main players first of all, but as I turn it over to you, what did you do with Law Professor? I didn't want to get knocked out by him. His last 2 races are concerning. I didn't want to get knocked out by him because I do think if I wanted to make excuses for him, I could.
Yeah, I saw you put Law Professor in there, and he's the only horse that you have in the mix that I just completely left out. Yeah. His last couple races just left a really bad taste in my mouth, especially the last one where he just never traveled well. And maybe it's a good sign that he's back in this race, but I could not go for him. And I ended up making the number 3 Yo Daddy my only key horse in this race. And the reason I did that, Mike, was because when I go through this field, I don't see a ton of early speed in here. And Yo Daddy does at least have that tactical speed where even if he's not the quickest horse away from the gate, he travels so aggressively in the middle part of his races that I know he's going to put himself in position to maybe kick away from this field around the far turn, or maybe others are trying to play catch up. And that was kind of my concern with Worcester, is that he doesn't have the most early speed, and Sheldon Russell is not the most aggressive rider and sometimes gets a little caught off guard in some of these races in New York. So that was my one concern with him, but I did agree with you that he's a horse that's definitely dangerous. I put him in the used category along with the very logical Bank Frenzy, who we didn't talk about too much, but just makes a lot of sense in this race. But I was hoping that Yo Daddy could kind of get the jump on these and maybe start it off with a horse that would be the second or third choice rather than the favorite. Let's move on to the 7th race. It's an Oaks Prep. This is the Busher, going the same distance and configuration as the Gotham. It is 1 turn mile for the 3-year-old fillies, and kind of like the Gotham, Mike, I don't know if we're going to get a real Oaks player out of this race, but it's another pretty competitive one to handicap.
Yeah, I thought so too. The other thing about this race too, David, is, and I don't know if you agree with this or not, I had a tough time sort of deciphering the pace of this race. I wasn't really sure. If you look at the Timeform US pace projector, they just have the one Liam in the dust on like a clear lead at the pace call. And that's certainly possible. I'm not sure that when I handicapped the race, though, that's how I envisioned it playing out. I guess it could. She's going to put blinkers on here. Either way, I kind of like Liam in the dust in this race. What I really like about her is maybe the turn back in distance for her. I think shorter, at least at this stage of the game, is better for her. So I'm interested in the inside horses here, and the horse that I'm definitely against. And obviously I realized that she could knock me out of this thing. I don't particularly like any of Sharp Smile's races denying. She could be the favorite in here, and I'm just not going to use that horse.
Well, let's throw up your grid for this race, Mike. And I think Liam in the Dust is an interesting horse because a lot of this field is cutting back from 2 turns to 1 turn. And I like that move for most of the runners that are making it. And she's definitely one of them because, I mean, she chased home a good horse last time in Mohima and just felt like she didn't quite finish off that race, even though the pace was moderate. So turning back is supposed to help her a little bit. I am questioning the overall quality of the Demoiselle a little bit. And I was wondering if that was a concern for you.
Yeah, I am worried about that a little bit. I mean, obviously the 1-2 finishers both ran really well in there, but they also separated themselves from those horses. So, you know, we'll see. Again, more than anything else, I just sort of wanted to give Liam and the Dust a benefit of the doubt because I just don't think she wants to go that far. And even when she was behind Mohima, obviously beat her two times in a row. When she was behind that rival in the allowance race 2 starts back, I thought Liam and Dust put in a really good finish in that race. Really solid late run in that spot. She can be more forward in here. The longer I looked at the race, David, I just feel like she's well spotted. Again, I don't really like Sharp Smile on the outside, so I was sort of looking for alternatives. I thought briefly about Drexel Hill, who did really rebound last time. Tough trip in the Untappable, ran a lot better last time, but I still didn't love that performance from her, so I couldn't really get to her, even if she's going to be a good price in here. And the horse I was most afraid of was Chad's horse, Ramify, who's just turning back out of a race that was just dominated up front last time in the Busanda where she was trying to rally.
Yeah, and January 18th was one of those days where it felt like speed was really dangerous and arguably enhanced a little bit throughout the card. So that definitely worked against Ramify, and she's another one that I think is going to appreciate turning back to the 1 turn mile where she showed a big finish to win her debut. So you can check out my grid for this race, and I also have Ramify in there, though for me, she's a used horse. I wasn't sure she was going to offer the value that I really wanted, especially going out for the barn that she does, but I did want to use her in this race. I also also have Lehman the Dust as a key horse. I agree with everything Mike said, so I won't rehash it. But I did have a more positive take on the horse that Mike was leaving out that could take money, and that's the number 9, Sharp Smile. I don't know that I loved her going the 9 furlongs, being a daughter of Practical Joke. And yes, she got a better trip in that race than Ramify did, just kind of sitting in the pocket behind the speed. But I did like the way that she was at least trying all the way through the wire. She was never giving up second. She kept trying to come back on that horse, My Sharona, all the way through the line. So I just think she's been improving steadily with every start. I like her turning back to the one turn here. And she's just drawn really well outside, where it's going to give Manny Franco options in a race where you mentioned, the pace is a little murky. I'm not exactly sure who's going to go to the front. Maybe it is that horse down towards on the rail, but at least I know that Franco is going to be able to look to his left, see what's going on, and maybe work out a good trip for Sharp Smile. So I don't know about you, Mike, but I found this to be a tough race to really extract that much value from. So I just went with the horses that I thought were the most likely winners as my key horses.
Yeah, it does seem like you're probably going to wind up with logical horses in this race. You just have to decide which ones you want to use and how you want to use them.
Let's see if we can get a little more value out of the Gotham, which is race 8. And if you want a deeper dive into this race, Mike and I did a horse-by-horse preview of the Gotham that you can get when you subscribe to the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel, which you definitely want to do. And also hit that like button if you appreciate videos like this. Mike, this Gotham field, it's got a New York-bred heavy cast with the 2 morning line favorites, Sand Devil and Sacrosanct, both coming in as undefeated state breds. But between the two of them, kind of feels like Sand Devil is the horse to beat. He's just been impressive in his starts so far. We already know he can get the mile.
Not only is he just fastest on the way into this race, but it also feels like maybe the mile plays better for him than it does for Sacrosanct, who could be his main rival in here, David. He certainly feels like the speed, if nothing else. These 2 horses should both be forward early in here. Just making an early lead, I suppose that could make Sacrosanct a little bit dangerous in this race, but he's going to have to prove he can get the mile, and it's not like Sand Devil's going to be far away. Man, you talked about extracting value out of this race when we switched to it. I had a tough time doing that. I think Sand Devil's going to be really tough in here.
Yeah, I see you've got a couple of middling prices as your used horses in this race, Mike, as we take a look at your grid. I know Sand Devil is your key horse. Did you think about switching it up a little bit, or what was it about Scorching or Garamond that gave you some cause for pause, maybe not to pick them on top or make them horses that you really wanted to key on in this sequence?
Yeah, I just wasn't really sure that they were going to be able to improve enough to beat Sand Devil. I mean, the more I looked at the race, the more I just felt like this is a really good spot for the favorite, and I don't really want to have a ton of money in against him. I don't think he's a horse that I'm just going to key in this pick 5 and see if he can get me through it. And instead of just throwing Sacrosanct in there as the other horse to use, maybe he's the one that I just try to beat. I thought Chad's horse, the number 9 Garamond, I just thought he was a little interesting because I liked his debut. I do have some questions about it, but I liked the way that he looked in the race. And I do think he has enough pedigree to go on and maybe take a step forward in here. If he's the right price, these horses tend to get overbet. But if he's around, you made him 8-1 on the morning line. If he's around there, I'd like to use him. And I threw Scorching in down at the rail. I think going short is better for him. He's obviously got surface and class considerations here. He's going to have to prove he can do it on dirt, and he's going to have to prove that he can go with these horses. But his first 2 career starts on the all-weather in sprinting, I thought he looked really good in those races, David, and he's cutting back for this.
I think you make a good point about the way you're slotting these horses into categories, Mike. You don't want to try to force yourself into an opinion just to put a price horse on top or put most of your money through a price horse if you don't really believe that horse is way more likely to win commensurate to the price that he's going to be. And if you just think Sand Devil is the most likely winner of this race and is going to be a pretty fair price considering what you believe his talents are relative to the rest of this field, it does make sense to put him in as the key horse. And I kind of did the same thing. I've got Sand Devil in the key category as we take a look at my grid for this race. I am going to include one other horse that I think is going to offer decent value, and here is a key. That is the number 2 Normandy Coast, and just feels like a horse with upside to me. He's going to have to get faster, clearly, if he's going to beat a horse like Sand Devil as well as others in this field. I just like what I've seen from his last couple of performances, the way he broke his maiden going the 7 furlongs at Ellis Park last year, and then coming off the layoff last year at Fairgrounds was really gritty to fend off challenges on both sides, and he strikes me as a horse that will ultimately want want to go farther. We'll see if he wants to go farther against a field of this quality in just the fourth start of his career. But he's 15-1 on my morning line. We'll see if we get that price. But I thought, any kind of double-digit price would be value on Normandy Coast. And, I threw in the number 3 calling card as a use in this race because it just feels like he could get the right kind of trip because there is plenty of speed in here, Mike. And if it comes apart, he showed in that one-turn race when he broke his maiden that he's got a big finish on him.
Yeah, he really did. He looked really good winning that race. And maybe he's just finally back in the right spot. I guess that could be a key for him. He's back around one turn. Maybe this race isn't quite as tough as the last two when they set him out of town.
Yeah, and I was going to also take advantage of the defend category in this race because I feel like this is a race where we don't yet know these horses that well, and there are plenty that still have questions to answer that could move forward. So I wanted to throw some of those wild cards in the defend category, including the two that Mike highlighted, Scorching, Garabond, and even Sacrosanct, who I thought ran really well last time. And maybe this pace won't heat up the way that we think it does, and that would certainly benefit him. Let's move on to the 9th race. It is getting away from the stakes portion of this card, but still a pretty intriguing affair as we check out this New York bred allowance optional claimer. And Mike, I think the horse that's going to attract a lot of attention is the number 8 Quick to Accuse, going out for the very powerful Brad Cox stable. The big question with Quick to Accuse, though, is what kind of form is he in? Because you generally expect these Cox runners to keep running well once they get into good form. And he threw it a bit of a clunker last time as the favorite, albeit at a higher level than this. But now he's dropping in for the tag. And I do have a little concern that he might just be going in the wrong direction.
I was worried about that too. I tried not to be too hard on him for that last race, David. As you mentioned, he was in a pretty tough field there. He was also, trying to drop back in distance into a race that was run at a pretty good pace. And I didn't think he ran great in there, but again, I was just trying not to be too hard on him for that performance. And, obviously it's worth at least pointing out that this is a race, the race where he's dropping into. Now he's already won this condition. He won this condition very convincingly the last time he was in it. I don't know. I thought this race was wide open. I kind of wanted to spread a little bit in here. And I also just felt like, and you give your thoughts on this too. I felt like this race was going to be run at a good pace.
It definitely feels like there's speed in this race. I mean, with Jamie Ness entering a speed horse, maybe for his closer in the number 1, My Last Mission. You've got Dolly's Bank, who showed speed last time, Sundays with Sandy, the King Cheek all the way on the outside, who's got a lot of early speed coming in from Park. So I agree. I could see this pace heating up, and at least Quick to Accuse does have that versatility to really adapt to any kind of pace scenario. Let's throw up your grid for this race, Mike, and you're going to use Quick to Accuse in the key slot, but feels like, or it's looking like this is more of a spread race for you.
Yeah, I wanted to spread around a little bit. I'm not way against Quick to Accuse, but I can't say that I totally trust him in here. I don't want to get knocked out by him, even if he is going to be a short price, because I do like the form overall that he's been in since Cox took over his training last year. And I'm not quite sure that he's run as poorly as it looks at his recent starts. We'll find out. But I certainly don't want to be leaning on that horse. The other two horses I'm going to key in here are sort of drawn more towards the inside. One of those is the 2 Neural Network. I realized that this could be a little bit of a reach. For one of the things that I like about this horse, David, is I feel like even though he's got the 1 fast race and it came going longer at Saratoga, I kind of feel like this horse is better going shorter. I don't think of him as a distance horse. So I like him at the 1-turn mile. He's no longer in the Chad Brown barn. So that's just going to make his price continue to go up. He's not going to get as much, he's not going to attract as much attention as he usually does. I feel like he ran pretty well last time, even though that was one of those longer distance races and, maybe better than the figure suggests. And I think they're going to go in front of him this time. So maybe he can just sit back and make a run. I just thought he was like kind of an interesting horse in here. He's going to be a price, and I want to give him one shot to sort of run back to that fast race he ran at Saratoga last summer. The other sort of key horse for me is the 4 Landoro. He hasn't run a fast race yet. He's going to have to break through at some point. I've always been a fan of this horse, though. I think the 1-turn mile is perfect for him. And I think it's another horse who can take advantage if they really heat things up in front of him in here.
Yeah, I think it makes some decent points about the number 2 Neural Network. He wasn't really for me in this race, and I don't know if I'm quite on board with your sentiments about the 1-turn being better, but I mean, he ran a race 3 back that would make him one of the favorites in here, and if you can make some excuses for why the speed figures dipped in his last 2, he will be a price in this race for a barn that's done pretty well, Ilke Kantermachi, over the past few months. I've got most of the horses that you mentioned, Mike, in the U slot. I think Landoro is dangerous for all the reasons that you mentioned. A horse that we didn't talk about yet, but that I've got in there is the number 6 Lots of Trouble, who I think thinking was also on your grid somewhere.
Yep.
A horse that will appreciate any pace that develops, and I thought was running on belatedly in a sprint race that did not feature a lot of pace last time. It was just dominated by a horse, what you're talking about, who is far superior to the competition that he's meeting here. So he was a little interesting for me if the pace does heat up. But I went for a horse that you left off your grid that I don't love in the sense that he's part of an entry, but I do feel like is going to show up and run his race here, and that is the number 1A, Hagrid's Flame. Just to be clear, the 1A is the half of this entry that I like. So, got the 1 up there. Obviously, they're coupled for wagering purposes. But I think it's interesting that Jamie Ness is not naming the same jock on these two horses. So maybe they're both going to run, and one is a speed, My Last Mission, looks a little tougher to make. And Hagrid's Flame is clearly the closer between the two of these. And Mike, this horse beat a weaker field when he won in New York 2 back, but I was actually more impressed by his last race out Laurel because he was handier that day. The pace really did not develop at all. And he really finished off that race and won so comfortably in the end. I mean, the jockey barely had to ask him for anything. It just feels like this horse has been way more engaged since getting into Jamie Ness's barn. And, Jamie Ness gave him the one more shot in a claiming race, but it feels like once he starts to protect these horses and they keep winning, they tend to get even better and sometimes hold their form. So I'm hoping that I'm catching Hagrid's Flame at the right time when he's still on that upward trajectory. Again, being part of the entry hurts the price a little bit, but I think if you beat Quick to Accuse in this race for pick 5 purposes, you might be doing okay.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with that. And didn't just to add on with your Hagrid's Flame take there, didn't it feel like he was a little underrated for his prior trainer? I mean, I know he never really put everything together, but he had shown flashes early on, and maybe he's just that kind of horse now who's finally putting it all together. And
he's a very pace-dependent horse who did not always get the right pace setups early in his career. So we'll see if this field holds together after scratches, if that is still the case on Saturday. Let's close things out with this 10th race. It is a 12-horse field of New York-bred maidens at the special weight level. And Mike, we've got some horses in here who have actually shown some talent so far, although one of them, who I think has shown the most talent, is developing a little bit of reputation as a professional maiden. That is the number 1, Vikinda, who I guess is the horse to beat based on the company that he's kept and the speed figures that he's earned, having finished behind horses like Sand Devil and even Prince Valiant, who came back to beat a tougher allowance field in his next start. But the second place finishes are starting to pile up for this horse. Starting to run out of chances for sure. I don't know how much you can really trust him in here. I also don't know that you want to necessarily be strongly against him, or at least I didn't want to be. I just felt like I would use him, but also, just sort of use some other horses because it's a big field. He's down on the rail. He's already shown that he doesn't mind settling for second. I think he's going to run well in here, but I just didn't want to have all my eggs in his basket. I just thought that there were too many other different ways to go in here. I mean, I don't think there's like a ton of talent in here, but there are enough horses you could make cases for. Yeah, Mike, a horse that we agree on that we both have in the key slot on our grid, and we'll throw up yours first, is the number 9, Share the Loot, who is one of 2 Melanie Giddings horses in here. And I mean, to me, on talent, he just stacks up very favorably against Vikinda. And maybe his form is a little dirtied up by the fact that he's faced Open Company a couple of times recently, but I think it just makes a ton of sense in this race. Yeah, I'm not sure he isn't a little bit even more likely than Vikinda is in here, but we'll see. My takeaway from him too, David, from watching his races, and you can tell me whether you agree or disagree. But to me, this is a horse who has plenty of speed, and they just haven't really been aggressive with him in any of his races. He gets out of the gate well, and it feels like a couple of those early races, they could have made the lead with him if they wanted it, and they just didn't take it. I thought that was sort of an egregious ride 2 starts back at Gulfstream going 7. I mean, I don't know why they didn't put him on the lead at even money, but they conceded to the winner, and they couldn't catch that horse. Obviously, he was just in way tougher last time. You got to give him a pass for that one. But he was really logical. He's one of my keys. I did make Vikinda one of my keys because I don't want to lose to him, but there are obviously starting to be concerns with him. The other key for me is the first-time starter of the 5, Toga Dan. I like his pedigree. I liked his breeze last May. I thought he looked really good breezing. He goes out for a trainer who wins with first-time starters, and I just think maybe they've landed in a pretty good spot here. So I wanted to use him. I made him one of my keys in here, even though I'm usually a little reluctant to lean on first-time starters, but I wanted him in my mix. And then I just threw a couple of horses at bigger prices in a used spot here because I do want to have a little coverage in here, David. And one of those horses is the 3 Roofer, who I don't know. We'll see what he does. I actually liked him quite a bit in his most recent start. If I'm being honest, I thought he would have run better than he did in there. I wasn't thrilled with that performance, but I still think he has a chance to rebound here. He's got some speed. His first couple of races were pretty good. Yeah, he's a horse I thought about. I think I left him off my grid completely as we take a look at my grid for this race. And I'm also viewing this as one where I want to spread around just a little bit to close things out. But yeah, I was not thrilled with the way Roofer finished off his last couple of races, but you are probably going to get a much better price on him this time. I used that first-time starter in my defend slot, Toga Dan. I was a horse that I'm afraid of. I didn't really want to take a first-time starter in this race because I feel like some of those with experience have shown enough talent that a first would have to be pretty good. But he could slip through the cracks at a price for a trader that, as you pointed out, does win with these types. The horse that I upgraded into my key slot along with Share the Loot is actually the other Melanie Giddings horse on the outside, the number 12, Dia Romano. And Mike, you were talking about some of the trips that Share the Loot got. Dia Romano has got some less than desirable trips as well. Really wide in his only dirt race. Things were even worse in the second start when they tried the turf for them. He was out in no man's land every step of the way. And then last time on the synthetic, I kind of shuffled back around the far turn. Didn't look like he was loving that all-weather surface. But I'm intrigued by this horse getting another chance on the dirt because he's got a pedigree that suggests he should be more of a dirt horse, being by Union Rags. He's never sprinted before, but he's a half-brother to a horse named Detective Tom, who was a very fast sprinter, I believe, for Michelle Nevin. So I feel like this horse at least deserves a shot sprinting, and now drawn outside with blinkers going on, first time gelding. Just feels like there are a lot of changes with this horse, and I think showed some hints of talent. And I think he would maybe fly under the radar more so than the other Melanie Giddings horse, the number 9, Share the Loot, who admittedly has done more on the racetrack so far. I've got Vikinda in there as a use horse. For me, he's like the quintessential use horse because, I mean, he's not going to offer any great value, but he probably is one of the 2 most likely winners of this race. And if I'm right about some prices prior to this, like my horse in the Gotham, I don't want to get knocked out by Vikinda.
Yeah, same idea with me there. I mean, I don't want to lose to that horse, but he's certainly not a horse that I would be leaning on in this sequence.
And I threw the number 7, 9, and 4 in as the other use. I just like the job that Ilkay Cantermachi has done. He is first off the claim for that barn, taking off an extension blinker that I don't think he was liking for Rudy Rodriguez. Well, let's close things out, Mike, by throwing up our entire grids for each of us, so that you can see how we're going to play this entire sequence. And let's do yours first, Mike. Just talk us through how you're going to break this down and which legs you're looking to be right about to be successful in this sequence.
Yeah, my keys are, I mean, obviously one of my keys is Sand Devil in the Gotham. I know he's going to be a short price. The more I looked at that race, the more I just felt like he was in the right spot. And I didn't want to go deep in that race trying to beat him, even at the short price. But my other key is going to be in the very first leg. Again, I sort of got really interested in Worcester. I like all of his races pretty much. I do think this trainer's gotten him into really good form. I think he can get the right trip in this race, even if they don't go that fast early. So I kind of wanted to lean on him and Sand Devil and then, sort of take it from there. And, we sort of talked about the Busher where I had a tough time, finding any interesting horses there. I feel like I just used the logical ones, but I didn't want to use all the logical ones, especially since I have Sand Devil there. So I'm going to try to beat the favorite in that race and sort of lean on the horses drawn down towards the inside. The 9th and 10th races, to me, they were more spreads. I thought a lot of different horses could win, and I was going to try to get prices in those legs.
Now, Mike, well, let's hang on your grid for just a sec because I have a question. I noticed that you did not take advantage of the defend category that we set up for you. I just was wondering if you had a reason for that. I know using horses defensively can be a very divisive word for some players, and some just don't like to think about things that way. I was wondering if you had a take on that.
Yeah, I just don't I'll get used to this as we go on. I just didn't know, to be honest, I didn't know what the real difference was between use and defend horses. So it's not like I don't do a ton of spreading when I play pick fives anyway. I'm not like trying to throw horses in just to hope that they can save me if I'm wrong about a race. So I'll figure out a strategy as far as those underneath horses go. If we can talk about maybe you can go ahead and tell me how you think about the use and defend slots there, and I can incorporate that. But I just try to get the horses that I think have a real chance, who are going to offer some value, and get them in there. And I'm not just trying to throw horses in there just to try to stay alive.
No, I think that's a great answer. And I love the different perspectives people have on their strategy for how they tackle these wagers. And, you're generally playing horses that you like in these sequences, and you want to leave out the horses that you don't like. So it does feel kind of counterintuitive to throw horses on your grid that you don't really think are that likely to win, or you don't think are going to offer great value. But for me, as we throw up my grid for this race, I did put some horses in the defend column just because there are a few races that I have questions about. I don't have full confidence in my opinions, and I want to have that extra coverage because I find it so hard to be right at every leg of a pick 5. I want to sort of give myself the leeway to maybe have a horse be a backup plan that maybe I don't love, but is a horse that I think certainly has the likelihood to win the race, that I'm at least afraid of them. So those are the horses that I'm putting in my defend category generally. As far as how I broke this down race by race, I didn't feel like I had particularly clever opinions in the first 2 legs. To me, the horses that I've got in the key and use slots are just generally logical horses that I think are the more likely winners that I'm trying to just advance to the later legs of the sequence using. I hope to get that 2-horse home in the Gotham. He's the big price that I'm using in the key slot in this sequence, Normandy Coast. So we'll see if I can be successful with him, but I would be happy to advance with Sand Devil as well, and then hopefully get alive to Hagrid's Flame, who I did get down to be my 1 key horse in the 9th race that otherwise you might be tempted to spread in that leg. And then I'll lean on those 2 Melanie Giddings horses to close things out, hopefully getting the bigger price home with the number 12 Dio Romano. So that's how Mike and I are going to play this Gotham pick 5 sequence. Mike, got any final thoughts?
No, listen, it's an interesting sequence. I hope people get involved. And I do just want to say, this is my first time, doing this with the new format. It's fun doing the videos this way, sort of condensing things a little bit more, but still getting enough room to sort of talk about our opinions and how we feel about these races. I enjoyed this. I'm looking forward to doing it again.
Well, I'm looking forward to doing a lot more of this content in the future. And everybody, if you like the way that we're laying these out and you have ideas for what you'd like to see us cover in the future in these multi-race sequences or other types of videos, like I said, leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you. We love the feedback. And also make sure to subscribe to the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel to not miss any of these updates in the future. Everybody, thanks for tuning in to this overview of the Gotham Day Pick 5, and good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.